Try to have some of these a little more. I mean, I got some ideas and I don't really have them in the outline form yet. Send them out. Welcome to KidMin Backstage, the place where we talk about kids ministry and take a peek behind the scenes. We try to share a little bit of what we've learned that works for us and some of our failures so you can avoid them. We release a new episode every Friday, and this is your backstage pass to see the magic or disaster that happens behind the scenes of our kids ministry. I'm your host, Gabe Baker, and today I am joined by Brother Matthew Critcher.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good, so glad to be on.
Yeah, well, we were just kind of talking a little bit about the topic. I think it's a good one. So what are we?
We're talking about lead to lift.
Lead to lift. So my summary or my introduction is basically the idea that great leaders it's not all about just achievements, like what they accomplish and everything. It's really about creating a space or a team where people can flourish. Mm-hmm. And so like strong leadership isn't about being the boss and being able to lay down the law. And there was, I think, an era of that, back in maybe the 80s, 90s, I don't know. Yeah. I think there was kind of an era of that style of leadership that's not really, I don't think, effective today. But it's not about being the boss, but it's about actually seeing, like, spotting talent and potential in other people and developing that. And so when you become good at lifting other people, as a leader, when you become good at lifting people, then that's when your team grows, your organization grows, your ministry grows, and becomes stronger and extraordinary.
Yeah, it's right on. I was reading a quote. I've had this on my phone for a while, and so when I read through what we're talking about today, it just kind of popped in my head. But there's a quote by Tom Peters that says, "Great leaders don't create followers; they create more leaders."
Oh, that's good.
And so, applying this to what we're talking about today, a leader's job is to create a next generation of leaders. It's to the people that are under. That is their responsibility, is to create leaders out of them, to pull their potential out of them to where they can completely fulfill their potential.
Yes. Well, and we are going to talk about Sunday school related things too, but I reference John C. Maxwell all the time, and he talks about, I think it's level 5 leadership, and he talks about the different types of leadership. First one being just learning how to lead yourself. And I think it's in his book. He references it in several books, but I think it's in his book, Leadership Gold. But he talks about level 5. I could be mistaken, but I think it's level 5 leadership is basically where you as a leader have developed these other leaders that are now pouring into you. They're leaders that they're leading their own things, but they're pouring into you, and they're helping you. So
that's good.
Yeah, that's really good. So we're going to talk about today with that premise, and I want to talk about it in the, we're going to talk a lot about in the context of staff and the team, but even with kids. But let's talk about a little bit. So point number 1 that I have there is value outside perspective. It took me a long time to learn this, and so I have in the notes there, different ideas don't impede us. They spark better solutions. Yeah. So great leaders get this. Instead of seeing different viewpoints as a roadblock or, kind of like, hey, stop. They see it as rocket fuel for smarter choices and fresh thinking. So it took me a long time, like say with a Sunday school set design, for example. Yeah. For many years, I did, I would say I still do a lot of it, but I did probably like 90% of it by myself. Yeah. Or maybe I'd have like my son Adrian when he was little, And so I did it by myself, and I'd come down and I didn't really have a lot of help. And then once in a while I'd get, a big gang of people to help with some stuff, and then I'd still complete a lot of it. And so in that, there's sometimes when people would have ideas that were like just totally outside of what I was thinking at all, Yeah. And it took me a long time to learn to value those ideas, because even though as a leader, it's not like, I mean, you have to stand for something, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't just waffle, or whatever, and like, oh yeah, okay, let's do that. You have to lead. But sometimes those ideas, even if it's, a quote unquote dumb idea, it gives you another idea. It sparks something in you,
Yeah. Doesn't have to be exactly what they're saying, but it, you can think about it and say, well, how can we somehow utilize a form of their idea?
Yes.
And then at that point, it encourages the other person who brought up the idea to maybe even try to come up with greater ideas themselves. They'll, hey, he used my idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And what else could I think of that maybe could help?
Because now they're motivated. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Inspired. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think, what was it? Habit 6 in the 7 habits is synergize. And it's talking about teamwork and working together. And one of the things that he talks about in that book is he talks about, nowadays this word diversity has it seems like a whole nother meaning.
It does.
And so I thought about that as one of the sub points, and I just I almost don't want to use it because it's been hijacked.
Yeah.
But diverse opinions, or having opposing opinions, I suppose, but having people that are different than you is actually a value. And often, and this is, like I said, I had a hard time as a leader getting over some of this, not in any kind of racial sense or anything even close to that. And that's what so often it's related to today. But when we see people that are different than us, they don't think like we do, or they're not cool like we're cool, whatever, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Like they don't like the same kind of stuff we like, like if you're really into music and they don't even like music, or maybe you're in a certain genre of music and they really like a different kind, you know, maybe they just really love rap music or something. And so
help us, Lord.
Yeah. And so it's easy for us to almost write somebody off. But if we can look at it instead of, if we have other opinions and other perspectives, then we will never get stuck in groupthink, where we're thinking so small, and that's kind of what leads to that outside of the box thinking, is having those other.
If everybody was like us, oh man.
Yeah.
Ooh. And having that diversity of opinion, of thought. I mean, there's things that someone might notice, like a problem with our ideas, that we don't think of, because a lot of times we're not going to be very critical with ourselves. Critical thinking is kind of hard to do with our own selves.
Yeah. This will work.
Yeah, this is going to be great. We'll see how we can, make this work. But when you get other thoughts and other opinions, especially from people they will be straightforward with you on it, or they'll be honest, or they'll give you their own thoughts and opinions. That's where critical thinking really helps. Or their
absolutely.
Opinion, and can build your own ideas.
Yeah. And sometimes it's scary to ask for that.
It is. Yeah.
It's hard to ask.
It's uncomfortable.
Because when you ask somebody that like pastor, for example, that will give you straightforward, honest feedback, it can be scary, because you're like, this is great, I did a great job here, and then to have somebody critique it and tell you what to fix, it can be intimidating. But yet, if you do that and you go through that pain and that process, it comes out so much better.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that is, I think everybody probably struggles with that. When your idea, especially if it's something you feel like, man, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And then someone comes around and they have constructive criticism.
Yes.
There is a difference between destructive criticism and constructive. So you have to know your source of who this is coming from.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to just take all kind of criticism. But if it's constructive, it a lot of times it doesn't feel good. And so, like you said, you don't want to ask.
Yeah.
But and when someone is giving their honest opinion, they're not trying to come at you. They're not telling you your idea is horrible.
Right.
They're trying to think, hey, how can we make this a little better?
Yeah.
What are the flaws that could happen that we can try to prevent from happening?
Exactly. Yeah, and when we ask for that, rather than be defensive, and this is it's human nature.
Yes.
But that's when we need to accept it. And like to your point, I think there's destructive criticism. Even sometimes somebody may not mean to be, but they might critique something and it's just an opinion. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to make it better or worse. It's just a different. And so you know, the more that you do it, the more experience you get in asking for critique and criticism, then you're able to discern that. The less you do it, it's painful. But the more you do it, the more you get used to it, and you're able to weed out what is destructive criticism. Yeah. You're also able to weed out, like, okay, well, that's a fine idea, but it's just different. It's not going to make it better or worse. It's just a different, maybe a means and methods. Maybe it's a different way of doing something.
Absolutely.
And it's not faster or more quality. It's just how this person would do it because they're left-handed.
Absolutely.
Whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, if you get that experience.
If I could throw one more point in before we jump to the next point, in regards to what we're talking about, this actually, I did chapel today at the school.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of this kind of ties in with what I was teaching. I was talking about fulfilling your potential. And something that gets dangerous is when we put a cap on our potential.
Oh, that's
Which,
good.
if you can apply this to your idea, to how you do something, sometimes we feel like we do it the most perfect it could ever be done. And we put a cap right there. And so anytime someone tries to say, hey, let's take that cap off, let's take it to a greater place, we're defensive. Like, hey, don't touch that.
Yeah, don't mess with that.
Don't mess. It's great where it's at right now. We're comfortable where it's at right now. But when you get out of your comfort zone and you allow that to be taken off and to accept the constructive criticism, then, man, I mean, you're gonna hit to greater. You have greater potential, and there's never a point where we can hit perfection, with ourselves or with what we do. And so,
and I hate the phrase, and I know it has merit in some places, but I hate the phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Oh,
I don't like that. I'm sure it applies in some situations, but I'm like, no, this is, we got to
You'll have to eventually fix it.
So here's another thing, and we're spending a lot of time on this first point, but it's good because another thing is with kids, like in Sunday school, I have experienced. I'll tell a little incident is thinking of benches. Like we used to have wood benches, so now we have these, Lifetime or whatever, the plastic ones, or I don't know what they are, but anyway. We used to have these wood benches, and so I had thought about like painting them different colors and stuff.
We had carpet over
we had carpet to soften them up and stuff. But I had thought about painting them, and in my mind, I remember thinking like, let's paint them all black, or it might have been navy blue or something, but just they'll all match, they'll look cool. And I remember talking about it, and I can't remember who it was that I was talking to, but it was a kid in Sunday school, and it might have been one of my kids at the time. This is years ago, but I remember talking about that, and they were just like, yeah, black. And I stopped, and I was like, okay, wait, in my mind, and in an adult, it's like, that looks nice and clean and great. Kids, they want like bright orange and yellow colors, and blue and colorful and stuff. So anyway, that was just kind of a little bit of a,
it's interesting,
seeing the other side. And so we as Sunday school teachers, I joke all the time about the crazy sets we build that I just get to be a kid, I'm just like, what would I want to, I want to do a slide.
Oh yeah.
So we get to do all that stuff. Okay. One more example on point one before we move on. A long time ago, we had split our youth group up. We've done this a few times, but we had split our youth group into three different separate youth groups. And so we did this thing, and it was kind of an experimental but we were doing a meeting. And so each of the different, youth leaders were doing a meeting with their group, and, trying to ask for feedback and ideas and everything. And I remember one of the young men came out of the meeting, and he told me, he's like, man, it went great. Nobody had any kind of complaints. They like how it's going and everything. And so I kind of told him in so many words, I said, well, then you just wasted your time.
True. Wow.
Because the whole point of the meeting was to gain critical feedback because we wanted to improve.
Yeah.
And so because, we decided we needed to have this meeting and everything because things were not on a macro level, looking, taking a step back, looking at the big picture. We said, okay, things are not working like they should. So this is one of the things we're going to do is we're going to have a meeting and get feedback. Well, if we didn't get that, then it was a waste of time. And so I guess the main thing that I'm thinking about is we talked a lot about, and I wasn't thinking about this all the way, but we talked a lot about feedback and critical feedback. And so, again, it's human nature to be defensive, but if you're going to ask, and you should, ask for critical feedback, then open yourself up to take it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you wasted your time and you made yourself hurt and you made that person uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I think, too, and I know we're on still the same point, but if you're the one being asked for critical thinking, be wise about how you do it because your approach can totally make the difference.
Yes.
If you approach it with humility, like, hey, you know what? I think your idea, this is just an example, but I think you have a good idea here, but I have an idea, maybe something we can make it better.
Yes.
Versus like, oh, you have a terrible idea,
Yeah.
They're never going to come back to you for feedback.
I remember doing work days around the church and stuff, and I started working construction when I was very young. But I remember seeing the difference of people. A lot of times they would, here's this 15-year-old kid, and they didn't know I've been working for a year in construction, and they'd be like, treating me like an idiot. So I would I was a respectful kid, and so I just deal with it. But then there was, I remember Elder Glenn Burgess was one of these that, like, the one that definitely had the right, they had the right to tell me, hey, go do thus and such or whatever, or treat me, like I was a kid, because I was. But they would be like, hey, can I show you something? I'm trying to pull a nail or do something. Hey, can I show you something? And I learned that, and I use that all the time.
Yeah, I've noticed.
Yeah, I was like, hey, can I show you something?
It really works.
Because it makes the person not feel like an idiot.
Absolutely.
And it's just, and I think in that split second, it makes them think, oh, okay, this guy has experience, and he's going to show me something, versus making you feel dumb.
And they start to value what you just told them.
Yeah, exactly.
I know that from personal experience. When, even with you, like when we've worked on things.
Yeah.
Hey, let's try this way, and that's something I've noticed and I've appreciated about how you operate. It's like, hey, you know what?
Yeah.
It makes me feel horrible.
Yeah. Okay, well, boy, we just blew past point number 2, and I want to spend a long time on that too. So
these are all good. Oh man.
So number 2 is see the potential in others. Okay, so this can apply to both staff and to the kids.
Yeah.
And with the kids, the notes that I made there especially is the notes I put is seeing the potential in others requires looking beyond their present circumstances to glimpse the heights they may reach. So Pastor Burgess is one of the best at this.
Yes, he is.
Other preachers have talked about it, about how he develops leaders.
Yeah.
He's unique in that area compared to many pastors. He's develops leaders. And the other thing is, though, with kids, is he taught me, just by example, the older you get, the quicker time goes, right? Mm-hmm. And he taught me, like, you look at these young, I use this phrase all the time to be derogatory, but snot-nosed kids, right? You look at these young kids, and it's like that they are teenagers.
Oh, yeah.
And they're youth. And then pretty soon, I'm not that old, contrary to what my kids might say. I'm not that old, and I remember some of these young couples in our church now that, like, one couple I'm thinking of just had a baby.
Yeah.
And I remember them being kids in Sunday school. Have pictures of them. So, and I'm not that old. I got to reiterate that.
If you get anything from this podcast,
yeah,
Brother Gabe is not old.
So anyway, if we can learn that to value that, and I don't want to hog all the time on this, but just basically that's the thing is we see potential in others. Then they might be a kid today, but just wait a little short while, and they're going to be a young family in the church. And did you take the time to develop them?
So good. Every person has potential. And once again, this is tapping into what I was teaching. But I mean, from the youngest to the oldest, I mean, it doesn't matter how old you get, you still got potential. As long as you've got breath in your body. And an example is, I think of Caleb in the Bible. He was around 80 years old when he finally got to step into the promised land and start inheriting. And he tells Joshua, he says, "Hey, I'm ready to go out and conquer some land." He said, when 40 years ago, I have just as much strength now as I did then. I'm ready to go do this, because he understood that he had potential. And I believe that Joshua is an example of a great leader, someone who would develop leaders.
But
when you have that mindset of other people, you start to put away factors that could say, oh, well, they don't have potential. They're too young, or they're too old, or they've done this, or they've done that. When you put away all those factors, you realize, hey, you know what? They're creating the image of God, and God has created every person to develop and to have potential. Then you're going to have that mindset that says, hey, what are you doing? You need to go, well, I'm going to help you develop your potential.
Yeah, and if we could see people the way that God sees people.
It's so true.
I mean, man, that's powerful. Because what's the song? Others see a shepherd boy and God sees a king. About David. So before the timer is completely done with point 3, inspire with vision, and that sentence could be used in a lot of different ways. But kind of what I mean is when we recognize capabilities in people that they don't even know they have. And that's another thing Pastor's great at, is drawing out the talent of people. Like Pastor Burgess will look at kids in the school, and he'll they will probably sing one day. Let's start pushing that. Let's start pushing them into singing. Or, hey, they have a talent for music, and he's done it. I mean, so much.
Absolutely.
In our church, and so. So, and going back to if we could see things like God sees, if we could try to look at people and say, I mean, because, we've done at the Kid Ministry seminar down in California. They did this a long time ago, and we've done it in our Sunday school, but like a lesson on You Are Special, and talking about like the story of the Wimmicks or whatever. I don't know if you know what that is.
I don't.
It's the wood. Anyway, so it's a children's story, but so we talk about You Are Special, God loves you. Well, it's not just a children's thing. It is true. God made each and every single person. I mean, he knows the hair on our head, right?
Yes.
And so he made each and every single one of us. So if we could view, it changes your perspective when you think about, okay, God created this person to do something great. And it's easy to write people off. It's easy to be like, they can't do anything.
Yeah.
Or they give me this feeling like, And I know there's creeps and there's all kind, whatever. But God made that person. Now, they might not be fulfilling that potential. But what is the role that I can play to help them fulfill their potential, to help them realize it?
They still have the potential inside of them. It's like and I brought this out this morning too, but it's the talent. It's like the talents.
Yes.
You have that the person that's hiding their potential is like the one who's hiding his talent.
Buried deep down inside.
Buried deep, but it's still there. And until our lives are over, their life is over, we have time to reach in and try to help them.
Yes.
And when I was looking through these points, our second point and our third point really tie in hand to hand. The second point, we're talking about seeing the potential in others. And then the third one is basically you are now putting action to that.
Yeah.
You are trying to develop that potential. And so step 2, or point 2 that we have, that's got to come first. You've got to first recognize, hey, this, like you said, this person's got value.
Yes.
And at that point, when you have that understanding that, these people have value, then you're going to put action into it. It's very hard to put action if you don't really believe someone's got potential. You've got to see them like God sees them.
And that goes back to even the first point we talked about valuing other perspectives.
Yeah.
Is I think that I'm using the phrase write them off, but I think it's easy for us to maybe even as leaders to start to invest in someone, and maybe they have potential and they have talent, but it's in an area that you're not really interested in.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? But it's still needed for the kingdom of God. And so maybe we can take them so far and hand them off to somebody that can, I'm thinking of music for some reason, but, maybe we can take them so far, like you're a drummer and you start out and they're not really great on the drums, but they really want to play the trumpet.
Yeah.
And you don't have any interest in the trumpet. I don't know if you do or not, but you don't have any interest in the trumpet. But instead of writing them off is developing them as far as you can, and developing them doesn't necessarily just mean lessons or teaching them how to do something. It means developing them to the point where they want to use that talent.
There's disciplines you can teach them.
Yes, exactly.
That can move
where
over.
They're not burying that talent inside,
Absolutely.
They want to maximize it.
Yeah.
All right, so number 4 is empower with purpose. Effective leaders understand that their role is to remove obstacles, provide resources, and share knowledge that enables their team members to grow beyond their current capabilities.
So good.
So Pastor Burgess talks about all the time with the growth of the church. He talks about it with different things, but God's church is meant to grow. It was designed to grow.
Yes.
And so a lot of times we clamor about growing the church. And I'm not bashing it at all. But what he talks about is a lot of times what we need to focus on is removing the inhibitors. Remove the inhibitors to growth. Remove the obstacles to growth. Because if we remove those, it will grow, because that's how God designed it.
Wow.
And so that's with empowering leaders, is we remove the obstacles, and sometimes that's self-doubt. Sometimes it's how they see their self. If we can remove that, it's I like I said, I started working when I was really young, 14 years old. And so I worked with many, many different people. And I remember a gentleman that I worked with that he taught me so much by just example. One thing is his work ethic was just incredible.
Yeah.
But he taught me so much just by example, and he would I'd be like, well, I haven't done that before. Or here's a phrase. I remember he can you do this, 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 this? Yeah, I'll try. And he'd stop and he'd try, Gabe? Just do it.
Yeah.
And he wasn't meaning mean. He meant it you can do this. You can do it. And it changed. Something clicked eventually in my head. Yeah, I can do that. And I became more confident and better at my job. And so if we can help others see their own potential, and that's kind of in our point 3, but help others see their own potential, that is part of removing some of those obstacles.
So good. Or teaching them how to overcome. And
yes.
Oh man, it's incredible how much this is tying in with what I was teaching, because I brought inhibitors to to potential.
And I wasn't listening in.
It's just it's just right on. But here's a couple inhibitors, like you said, self-doubt is a big one.
Yes.
There's laziness.
Oh man.
There's an inhibitor. There's complacency, which is it's tied in with laziness, but complacency is kind of the point where it's hey, I'm comfortable where I'm at.
Yes.
Apathy. There's fear.
Yep.
Fear is a potential killer. But teaching someone how to overcome their fear.
Yes.
There's a lot of things. There's distractions. Distractions will rob your potential.
Absolutely.
So when you understand what is inhibiting you or inhibiting somebody else and their potential, you're going to be able to understand better how to help them and how to get them over it. Like if someone is letting fear get in the way, from them growing, you can then help them through teaching them, well, what does the Bible say about fear?
Overcoming the fear. And that inspiration of seeing some kind of goal or seeing some kind of, it's like the kitten that looks in the mirror and sees a lion. Or whatever. But like looking at seeing what could I become, then sometimes that helps dissuade the fear.
The inhibitors look really small when you see the outcome.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's good. I like that.
Yeah.
Inhibitors look really small when you see the outcome. So another part of that empowering, I thought of an example of Nehemiah. So you remember Nehemiah found out that the walls were broken down and asked the king to go over there and everything. So in that story, Nehemiah had the people build the wall, and he was an incredible leader, obviously, by being able to do that. But somewhere in there, and I didn't look this up beforehand, but I just remember this, somewhere in there, he had the people build the wall in front of their house or home, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But he had them build the wall in front of their home. So he gave them, tools, or maybe they had the tools or whatever. But I thought, going back to the trumpet guy, right, is empowering people is removing those inhibitors and helping them see how it benefits them. Zig Ziglar says, you help people get what they want, they'll help you get what you want, whatever. Yeah. And so helping them see how this benefits them in the context of the kingdom of God. And so that's one thing that I want to be able to do, and we're over our time here, but that's one of the things I want to be able to do with the kids in our Sunday school, is we do awesome Bible stories, and they like it, and we do interactive stuff, but I want it to click for them. I want them to see that they have the potential to do some of these great and incredible things.
Yeah, so good.
And like even some of the people they respect, that they look up to, they could be that.
Wow.
Okay, let's do a recap really quick, so we're not late for our next thing here. So number one is value outside perspective. So don't be afraid of them. Think outside the box, meaning like value other people's input and other people's opinions, and see the potential in others. Number three is inspire with vision. Let people see, give them a glimpse of what they could be. And number four, empower with purpose. And of course, in all of this is pretty pointed. It's a pretty specific podcast compared to a lot of the ones we do. In all of this, we have to do all of these things for ourselves.
Yes.
As a leader first, before we can pour into others.
That's good. Very good.
All right, well, that's a wrap.
There we go.